looked at all of the properties, and the record will reflect these observations. Any person affected by an administrative decision of this committee has 10 days from the filing of tonight's decision to make an appeal. Such appeals are heard by the Board of Adjustment. Information and applications are available from the zoning office. The county assumes no liability and makes no warranty as to the legality of any construction commenced prior to the expiration of this 10-day period. I will now introduce the committee. Carl?
Here.
George?
Here.
Pat?
Here.
Jerry?
Here.
Todd?
Yep.
Cindy? Mike? Here. One down. Call a meeting to order. Public hearing on applications 2019 text amendments. Okay, yeah. The following items will be considered by the Waushara County Planning and Zoning Committee. Amendments are being proposed to Chapter 18 of the Flood Code for Waushara County, Wisconsin, which would incorporate an additional dam failure analysis for the lower White River, which was recently approved by the DNR, as well as identify where the approved studies, maps, profiles, and data can be found. Several amendments are being proposed.
Talk into that.
Shh. Several amendments are being proposed to Chapter 58 of the Zoning Code for Waushara County, Wisconsin, which would provide further classification to several definitions, expand the time frame for occupancy of camping trailers, travel trailers, and mobile campers, place further restrictions upon and accessory structures, further define and or clarify several selected conditional uses, review and refine the list of conditional uses within each zoning district, and further refinement of the shoreline codes for certification by the Department of Natural Resources. All right. That scares me. I'm going to take a bite out of it before long. All right. Yeah, if you would kind of explain what's the...
Well, as you're all aware, every year we amend our codes to reflect recent changes in state statutes. We amend them to eliminate discrepancies that are identified through the actual application of the code, and we amend them, based upon comments that we receive from the DNR, DSPS, and other agencies such as that. This year, Amy and I undertook a comprehensive review of the codes and identified numerous discrepancies and inconsistencies. We also identified several codes which we felt needed tweaking or further refinement to address reoccurring issues that come up on a regular basis. In addition, we've worked very closely with the DNR in hopes of finally certifying our codes. The amendments before you are not significant changes, but rather a major cleanup effort to address these reoccurring issues and to be more user-friendly to the general public. They're also a result of numerous meetings and debate, as well as countless hours of proofing. Proposed amendments have also been given to all the interested agencies, townships, and have been reviewed by our corporate counsel. All comments received so far have been very favorable. The two code chapters that are being reviewed tonight are those to the flood zone, or excuse me, the flood code and the zoning code. At the business meeting yesterday, I handed out an addendum. Since we sent out the original packet through certified mail, we received comments from Joe Balin, who's a floodplain specialist at the DNR, and he just asked us if we could further refine our text. So what you have before you in the addendum is just a refinement or further explanation in terms of the actual maps, the actual agencies that prepared those maps, and the actual dates in terms of when those were prepared. If these text amendments, if everything goes ahead favorably and recommended onto the Board of Supervisors, I would just ask that we put an additional condition that the addendum be incorporated into the final version, and we'll revise the draft. Rather than draft 5 going on to the Board of Supervisors, it would be draft 6, and we'll put the date on there accordingly. So basically, what you would see is the first, like, 1 or 2 pages are going to be amended. Everything else should be pretty much in place. I did, at the business meeting, kind of talk about in generalities some of the major revisions, or what we feel is more or less the points of refinement in the code this year, having to deal with travel trailers, accessory structures, the conditional uses, or those listed uses under conditional uses, and then the shoreline zoning. Staff believes that the proposed text amendments will not only eliminate loopholes which have been identified, and have resulted in constant county staff oversight, but we also believe these will address concerns and comments received from the general public. They will also enable us, as I've said before, to finally certify our codes with the DNR, which is a requirement of the administrative rule NR 115. While the Planning and Zoning Committee, I know, will be making a recommendation on this later on tonight, staff is recommending approval of the text amendments to the Waushara County Codes number 18 and 58. And if you'd like, we can get into the specifics. If you have questions regarding anything, I'll be more than happy to address those concerns or questions.
Actually read part of mine over.
No.
Anyone have any questions?
The only thing that I can say is that I've gone over quite almost all of it here, and I was very, very pleased how what was put together and what was stricken out, which made a lot of sense because some of these things did come up at our meetings. And what struck me was the travel trailers. And I think that's was a good choice, and I think we were very very lenient in giving, was it 50 days?
Correct.
Yeah, from the previous 20.
It was 21 originally.
Yeah, 21. I think that was a good choice. This way, it'll give, like we mentioned at our Wednesday meeting, it'll give those people an opportunity to flex their time in order to spend time where they would like to at their property. Thank you.
I had a question. Are they required to, even if they're not using their trailer, to pull out of there, or not?
Yes,
That's a requirement.
they
So
they
that
would be required. They
you
have
can
to-
only be parked there 50 days.
Now, you're allowed to store your, like, one camping unit, travel trailer adjacent to your home. It has to be within 300 feet, and you are allowed to keep that on your residence. If you're looking at, and if there is no residence, and I'm going to use an agricultural property, for example, you'd be allowed one camper travel trailer, but it's a minimum of 15 acres. So, in other words, we just don't want people to, come in and that have AR properties, 1, 2 acres, 3 acres, and just plant the unit and leave it there all summer long. Because the reason for that is it just becomes literally an enforcement nightmare. You don't know when the people are there, when they're not there. Now, the time limits that we've put in there, and I think I talked about this at the business meeting, we're hoping that by opening up that window of opportunity for people, it'll satisfy a vast majority of the comments and concerns we've received. Now, question comes up, what happens if they go over that time limit? As long as they don't exceed it, significantly, as long as we don't receive any complaints, we're just going to hope that people can live within the confines of what's there. However, if we receive complaints from neighbors that that it's been parked there 2-3 months, people are in it on a regular basis, then we'll start the investigation process.
So if they have more than 15 acres, it could sit there longer, is what you're saying.
They would have to go through a conditional use for that.
I think we're asking though is like if they're there for a couple days, and let's say they go home Monday through Friday, they have to take the trailer
Correct.
with them. They can't just take it there and leave it there for 50 days if they're not physically there.
Right.
They have to store it inside of a garage or take it back and forth with them if they're not physically there for that 50 days. So if they go there for the weekend, they go home on Monday, they have to store it inside of a garage or something. They can't just take it there and leave it there 50 days. That's, not the idea. The idea is that they can use it there 50 days during the season. I don't know if that's what you were asking, Pat?
Yeah. I just
And
wanted to sure.
if somebody wanted to come up one weekend and leave it for the week and then come up the following weekend and take it back with them, to me, that would fall within that 10 consecutive days. And that would be permissible. But yeah, we don't want to get into a situation where people are just leaving it there, Memorial Day and then picking the thing up in Labor Day or at Labor Day.
And the chapter 58, it's a pretty comprehensive chapter. It covers a lot of things. And at yesterday's business meeting, we were talking about the camper trailers or the accessory structures with the limitation on living quarters above it. But there's a lot of changes throughout the whole chapter 58.
Right.
Most of those changes are just cleaning up the language.
Correct.
Consolidating, concising.
Correct. And if you look at the definitions, I think that's probably one of the first 5 pages in. You'll notice some definitions that we've stricken some language on there. In part, those are comments also from the DNR pertaining to the Administrative Rule 115 or 115. The DNR has certain specific requirements in terms of definition of a principal structure and definition of that of an accessory structure. We kind of, over the years, have just and that morphed or elaborated somewhat a little bit too much, and it wasn't falling in line with what the DNR wanted to see for what the definition of principal structure, because you have to keep in mind, principal structure is, it's mentioned numerous times throughout the code, and that even falls into the shoreland zoning code. So when we reference principal structure, it goes back to what our definition is, and that's why we had to do some tweaking throughout the code for it to still be in compliance to affect the shoreland code.
Well, I guess one question I had when I was reading through this, and I just had to page through to find the area, because this whole thing, it covers like wind turbines to marinas to, a whole bunch of stuff. But one of the areas is home occupations. And I know that we just sort of went through a process at the last meeting, and that process is still ongoing. None of the changes in that section or the stricken language is going to be contrary to the process that we're engaged in.
No.
If you follow.
Yep, I
Okay.
do. What we did, and that's good that you bring that up, because Amy and I went through it, and we made sure that the home occupation, and I'm going to start out, the home occupation to me is kind of like somebody that's running a small little office, or they have Avon or something like that. They run out of their home. It's a small little business. Home-based business is now something where you look at like a Hempy that has a home on the property, and he's running, something out of his shed or out of his pole barn. It's a much larger, operation. But still, you'll notice what I tried to do is tighten up that code too to prevent scrapping. Amy and I, we also tightened it up to maximize the square footage that can be outside the home. And one thing we also did is we took out of that section of the code for something that could be run, it was professional business office out of the home.
Right, I saw that.
To me, a professional office business, or professional business office is more a commercial type use and should really be confined to a commercial property. We've had some instances in the past, and we're dealing with it still to this day, where somebody had a pole barn, they called it a professional business office being run out of their pole barn. They have no residents on the property. The problem with that is I think that gives an unfair advantage to somebody that, has a commercial business in a commercial district and is paying those types of taxes and things. whereas this person is somehow, coming underneath the radar, so to speak. So Amy and I, we decided to do away with the professional business office and keep that just in the commercial zoning district.
One thing I was looking at and that I was wondering about is if the camping trailer that determines how much and when it's going to be used. And the reason I'm asking, because 2 years ago when we went in on one, the husband came up in the summertime and everything and stayed in it for a week or so and going. But then his wife came up for bow hunting season and put it in. So would they be able to, each one of them, to have 10 days, or
No.
is it just the trailer that gets the 10 days?
It would be the property.
Okay. Just a question.
Yep.
Any further questions? Roll call? Here.
Here?
Here.
Very good.